Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/cinematary. This gives you access to over 180,000 titles to choose from on your iPhone, your Android, your Kindle, or MP3 player. Right now, guys, I am reading a series you would not believe. It is called the Fractured Fairy series, and I'm reading book 1 on Audible. Book 1, Box of Frogs. So, Box of Frogs. Let me just summarize this real quickly for you. Now, remember, this is a 9-hour audiobook that you could be listening to right now if you've signed up through the Cinematary thing, but that's a whole other thing. Let's talk about the summary of Box of Frogs. So, one corpse, several bizarre-looking attackers, some very strange magical powers, and a severe bout of amnesia. Madrona is not having a good week. I mean, are we ever? It's going to be okay, though. All she has to do is find out who she really is, protect a soap star from being attacked by a stalker, and work out why so many people seem so afraid of her. Because surely she's a good person, right? I don't know where the frogs work into this, but there's going to be, I bet there better be a box of them. There hasn't been a box of them yet. After this, there's a lot of other good ones. There's Here Be Sexist Vampires, which sounds like something. Summon the Keeper, Wraith, Natural Witch, Slouch Witch. I guess she has bad posture. I don't know. But you can find all of these and more on Audible. Again, you can get a 30-day free trial by going to www.audibletrial.com/cinematary. That's www.audibletrial.com/cinematary, or clicking the link in the description. Now, onto the show. Welcome to episode 203 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford,
Nathan Smith.
And in today's episode, we will be doing movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we will be continuing our Young Critics Watch Old Movies series with 1961 through 64's Dog Star Man. It's kind of a clunky thing, but I don't know. That's the best way I could describe it. So that'll be part 2, but we have a kind of different setup for part 1 today. We're going to do a rapid fire.
Yeah.
We got 10 minutes each to talk about our movies. Is that right?
Preferably 5 minutes per movie, since we all have at least 2.
Okay, yeah. So 5 minutes per movie. We're going to do that. We're going to start with me.
If you want to skip Nathan or skip me or skip Zach, you'll know exactly how far to jump ahead in your podcast app. So I guess I'll police our timer for now, and then somebody else can do it for me.
All right, that sounds good.
So Zach, what's the first movie you're talking about?
I'm talking about Ant-Man the Wasp first.
Your 5 minutes begin now.
Man, I don't know, guys. Ant-Man the Wasp. It's the sequel to, spoiler alert, Ant-Man. It's the latest Marvel movie.
It's not a spoiler.
It's directed by Peyton Reed, who did the first one. It stars my boy Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly and other people. And I don't know, man. They had earlier this year we had Black Panther, which was a cool, really fun movie. And then they had Avengers: Infinity War, which was like
less so.
It was just like let's just do some stuff and pretend like we're screwing up people's minds. And then this one comes out, and it's kind of like if you had like a full course, like big steak dinner at like a 5-star restaurant, and then for dessert they gave you like a homemade like pudding or a Kroger cookie. That's what it kind of feels like.
That's very specific.
The level of quality that went down was just significant. And, we're at this point in this whole cycle where they don't even really have to try. I mean, people are gonna go in there. They're gonna flock like, dare I say it, ants to this thing.
Wow.
And I guess I understand.
Ants don't flock.
I guess I understand.
They follow their leader.
Yeah,
they swarm.
They'll follow the leader of Disney to this thing, and I don't. It's been really hot outside, so I guess that's cool because you get to go inside and get some air conditioning for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But this is a 2 hour.
That's what they should be advertising.
This is a 2 hour movie.
If movie pass tanks, I think they should just go into the air conditioning business. I mean, really, that's
They
why
should.
people use them.
It should be like, do you want to get out of the heat for 2 hours? We got a movie for you, Gotti. But like for Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's just, I don't know what to say, guys. It's, you know what you're getting. There's some bad guys, there's some good guys. They fight each other. They're trying to do that thing again like they did with Spider-Man, where the bad guy's kind of not a bad guy. They're just trying to figure their things out. But I'm like, just give us some bad guys. I don't know what to do with this. Paul Rudd entertained me. That's it.
I gotta say, just from watching the trailers, you know, as a non-believer of these movies, the action looks pretty interestingly staged in terms of all this size jumps that happen, both to small and to big superheroes. Does any of that play well?
Did you? So you watched the trailer?
I've watched the trailer.
Whatever's in the trailer, you've already seen what's in the movie. So
I do think that when it comes
Is-
to like the hierarchy of Marvel directors, that Peyton Reed is maybe a little more towards the top. Just in terms
that's not
of
saying much, but yeah.
yeah, but you know, I mean, Down with Love has I have not seen that film, but it has its following and seems to have a sharp visual sensibility, and I think Bring It On kind of does too. So I have not seen this movie.
If this
I saw
wasn't
the
a
first
Marvel
one.
movie,
Yeah.
if this wasn't a Marvel movie, I think it'd be fine. Like it like the chemistry between Paul Rudd and Evangeline Lilly are solid. Evangeline Lilly's trying her best to work this boring character into some life. It's not her fault, but but then you have to shoehorn in all of this Marvel bullshit, and it's, you know, this happens before Infinity War, so you know, people aren't they haven't snapped yet and killed half the world. Did you see that story where they killed half the animals also?
What?
Who the fuck cares? Like, what are you talking about? Why
Zach,
are you killing
can I ask
animals?
you,
one more minute?
is there
by the
any
way.
scene in this movie as clunky or as awful as in the first one when he just like goes and fights what's his name, Falcon? That's his name?
No,
for like
no, they don't
no
try to
reason?
shoehorn it.
Is there anything that bad?
They save all the true tie-in stuff for like the end credits. Honestly, this is better than the first one.
Okay.
Like, this one at least has a little bit more pizzazz to it. But Michelle Pfeiffer shows up and has fingerless gloves, and I love that. But that's about it.
Is T.I. also in this one?
Yeah, he has some good lines.
Yeah.
Him and the guy from The Dark Knight who was the crazy person, and Michael Pena are like the friends who just say, you know,
Right.
funny stuff. And you know, what are you gonna do? What do you get? Walton Goggins is in this for some reason.
Oh, hey, he's good.
Yeah, but then I just wanted to watch Vice Principals.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Just
all I
watch-
took away from it.
Don't, you know. Whoa.
Go see Go watch Vice Principals, guys.
There's your time. Well, I'll watch Vice Principals review. Okay, what's your next movie, Zach?
My next movie is Won't You Be My Neighbor, which is
You have 5 minutes.
it's a documentary about the life, the lessons, and the legacy of the iconic children's TV host Fred Rogers. Guys, I don't know, like it's I mean, it's fine. Like, it's fine. Mr. Rogers seems like a nice guy. He seems like a real A+, eat your vegetables kind of dude. I think it's good that he was in the world, but is this like a movie? Like, this doesn't seem like a movie. This seems like a 3-part documentary series that you have on PBS that people talk about on Twitter for a couple weeks, and that's it. But we put this into the theater, and it was an hour and a half, and it's fine, but it doesn't feel like a documentary. It just feels like a bunch of kind of clips together, and people talk about how Fred Rogers was nice. His dad talks about how sometimes he would cuss, and that was cool. Or his son talked about how he cussed, and that was cool. And you know, he seems like a swell dude. He was like tackling the racism and the homophobia and all that stuff early on, but you know, we could have knocked this out in a New York Magazine piece, quite honestly.
People are loving this movie. Like, people are tweeting about coming out of the theater in tears. They're giving this movie 5 stars on Letterboxd. Why do you think that it's working on people?
Because we're living in a state of just complete angst constantly because our political climate is awful. The world is awful. We're going to die from climate change. And this comes out and it's like, oh, that's nice. This guy was a cool person. And so we're crying because someone's nice. That's the level of like humanity that we've reached as human beings. That somebody is just decently nice and we're crying because of it. Like what are we doing as people that like a half-hearted hour and a half long documentary is bringing people to tears? Like at some point soon somebody's gonna like have a cat eating a muffin and that's gonna make people cry. Like
probably
I don't
already
know what
does.
to do with this, guys. Like why don't we just fix our humanity now? Like, or let's just end it. Like, honestly, let's just end it at this point. Like, let's just wipe it all out.
This is too
Won't you be
dark.
my neighbor? It's in
Thanos
theaters
did
now.
Nothing wrong.
I don't think I want Zach to be my neighbor.
Zach, you still have 2.5 minutes. Do you have anything else you'd like to say about
with climate change, though? He didn't see the. And then like,
What?
what are we supposed to? I don't know. I don't know. It's just so stressful all the time.
You sound done.
Like he
with
seemed.
this movie.
He's. No, I'm not done with this movie. I'm just done with
the lot.
just the world.
Yeah.
Just the world. Do you ever just like read stuff and you're just like, let's just. Like I've said on multiple occasions this week that I'm just gonna go walk into a river because it's just like, what are we doing, guys? Let's
don't walk into a river.
Let's game plan this a little bit and be like, let's just be like a decent human being, and that's what you get from Won't You Be My Neighbor. You know,
do you think that this movie could convince people to be decent human beings?
No.
Does it have that potential?
Nobody. Nothing is going to convince people unless we rid ourselves of our shackles to money and reputation. Wow. Like it's
that
we
going
get there.
off.
We're like Fred Rogers isn't gonna save anything, and Fred Rogers knew that. And they're like at the end, would he have been able to deal with this? No, he saw 9/11 and was like, "What the hell is going on now?" Like he got it, and then he died, and he was like, "I'm getting the hell out of this place." And so he went to be like second Jesus or whatever. And that's the movie.
Second Jesus.
Oh God.
Won't You Be My Neighbor? It's in theaters now.
Okay, you have 45 more seconds if you'd like to just say any more things.
Like, if you can have the ability to, I would say call your senators, but at this point, like...
What are they going to do?
You gotta organize.
Your senators are going to do.
You gotta...
Just go into a corner and cry, not at this movie, but just to cry at the decay of humanity that we're living in. Also, fuck Bill Maher.
Fuck Bill Maher, yeah. Everybody's like, Bill Maher should be fired. Yeah, he should.
That's unrelated,
Yeah.
but I just fuck that guy, man. Go watch Nanette on Netflix.
I just got done watching.
That's my last recommendation.
I'm not going to talk about it though. You should do that. Okay. There's your 5 minutes.
Whoa. That alarm is extremely upsetting. I feel like I'm waking up each time it goes off.
Editing that down to reasonable volume. Who's going to be my 5-minute timer? I'm going next, I think.
Me, I guess. Let me pull it up.
Maybe you can curate a more soothing alarm.
I'm pulling up the alarm app. Okay, so we're giving you 5 minutes, which starts now.
Okay, so speaking of the collapse of civilization, I'm going to talk about the First Purge. Now, the Purge movies, it's a franchise a lot of people like to dunk on. I think that this is an interesting case of a franchise where that is pretty good. I like it, but none of the movies in the franchise are particularly good. Like they're fine. They're all serviceable, or some of them more serviceable than others. But like they have yet to make a great movie. But the concept is interesting enough, and they do new things with it every time that makes me keep wanting to see more from the Purge movies.
The one consistently good thing about these movies is that they always make you imagine a better movie.
Exactly.
I don't. Yeah, it's just you sort of erase the fact that it's not actually very good because it's such a good idea, and there is so much that could be done with it.
I co-sign that 100%. No, I would argue that none of them are bad, except maybe the second one, which is just a mess structurally.
I think maybe the first one. I think
like the first one. I like the first one. It's so people know, if they've listened to a couple podcasts back, that I'm working on a video essay about horror films. More specific concept to be announced. But one of the points that I will make in that video essay is tangentially related to The Purge. And I'm going to say this in the video essay, but I'll go ahead and say it now. My take on the franchise as a whole is that only the first Purge movie is technically a horror film. And then all of the others after that kind of become more action-centric as they go along. And I definitely think that has been confirmed with this new movie, The First Purge, which kind of ends with this big raid sequence on a housing project. Lots of like martial arts happening and lots of military-grade weaponry going off. There's not a lot of dread or tension. It's just all like violence, just, blasting out at you. The concept this time is it's prequel to the first movie, of course. It's going back and showing you the origins of the concept of the Purge. It is the result of a collaboration between a new political party who broke the two-party system and a psychologist who believed in this idea, like if you purge yourself of certain violent emotions, you'll have a peaceful, more happy life. And the concept in this movie specifically is they're going to test it out on Staten Island, a very limited space, just to see how it goes. And if enough people participate and it seems to have done its job, they will expand to America more broadly. And we know they do, of course, because we have 3 other movies to prove that. This movie, I think, is a retread, but also a refinement of exactly what they've done in the second Purge movie and the third Purge movie. Again, they're all kind of action-centric, and they all have to do with many different, like, disparate groups of people kind of caught inside the chaos of the Purge and, like, having to try and find each other and survive through the night. There's always a lot of very clear political messaging. This is probably the most like explicitly liberal movie franchise I've maybe ever seen. Like they specifically call out the NRA, and like there's specific lines in this movie meant to allude to the Trump administration and things like that. Basically connecting the dots to the ways in which the government does not give a shit about people's lives today and is okay if they die.
1 minute
left. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I think this movie is an improvement on the formula of the last 2, even though I don't think that those 2 are particularly successful. I think this one is more successful. It loses me a little bit in the climax sequence when it just becomes this like all-out action mayhem. But I think the characters are more well-rounded. The structure is a little bit more clearly defined. And I admire these movies just like boldness and devil-may-care attitude about how forcefully they're going to make their political points. And at the end of the movie, I got a little bit emotional at certain exchanges between people talking about like how are we going to live in this world once our society has kind of come to this point, kind of like Zach was talking about with Won't You Be My Neighbor.
You are done.
That's the first Purge.
And we're starting you your next movie.
So I'm going to talk about another horror movie called The Endless. This is an indie horror movie by, oh my gosh, who are the directors of these movies? The Endless is by Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson. They have in the past directed a movie called Spring, which is like a horror romance, as well as a movie called Resolution, which The Endless is a quasi-sequel to. I haven't seen Resolution, so I can't talk about all the ways in which those movies are connected. But the concept of this one is about 2 brothers, actually played by the 2 directors, Aaron Moorhead and Justin Benson. And they have a backstory, which is that when they were younger, they were a part of this, what they call a UFO death cult. And the older brother was able to convince the younger brother to flee, escape the death cult, and they've kind of been living their adult lives in the broader civilized world. Yet they are intrigued to go back to the cult to visit because they've received a videotape in the mail, kind of implying that everybody at the cult is going to commit suicide very shortly, and they want to go visit their friends in their last days, or not necessarily their friends, but past acquaintances. And when they get there, things get very strange, Lovecraftian. This movie opens with a Lovecraft quote and then another quote about siblings, and really what the movie's trying to do is overlap those two ideas, the Lovecraft's idea of the horror of the unknown and this like incomprehensible evil, and then this thing about siblings not being able to communicate with each other and never truly expressing their feelings until they're on their deathbed. The movie is really ambitious in terms of the intricacies of its concept. I don't necessarily want to spoil. It is a very difficult movie to kind of wrap your head around, like what exactly is happening in it, because they don't quite spell it out for you until a certain point in the runtime. And it's a movie that I wish had a bigger budget, because the stuff that it ends up doing is so strange and mysterious and cosmic that they don't quite have the money to put it visually on screen in a satisfying way. So what they do instead is choose not to put it on screen at all. And I can kind of see, like, from the angle of like a Lovecraft fan, you could say, well, that's kind of true to the concept. It's something, the horror of this movie is something that could never be truly understood by human eyes. So why would we even attempt to put it on screen? But I mean, cinema is a visual medium, and I would like to see them try. My main takeaway from this movie is that I would have liked to see a version of this that had the budget of something like Annihilation. That movie having these really stunning visuals, these really harrowing sequences, but not a lot to speak of in terms of acting or character development or like really clear thematics. I think this movie has the latter, but it doesn't necessarily have the money to throw around to make it look like a big spectacle as it should. If you go on Letterboxd, type in The Endless, you'll see this really incredible poster, this like green and red and orange swirl in the sky with like two moons around it. And nothing you will see in this movie is anywhere close to, as fantastic as the imagery on that poster, which is a real shame. But I do still think it is an interesting movie. It is a little indie that I admire. I like these directors. I think Spring is an even better movie. And if you like kind of low-key horror, I would recommend checking this out. It's on VOD now, as is their movie Resolution, which this is a sequel to. It won the Best in Show prize at the Knox Horror Festival last year. This is one of the movies that I skipped at that festival like an idiot. I'm kicking myself for not seeing it in a theater. But it's good. I recommend The Endless. That's all I got.
Cool. I guess it's then my turn to talk. You have 30. I mean, you have 30 seconds left if you want to say anything else at all about anything.
Fuck Bill Maher.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
So I guess continuing in our theme of, I don't know if one of you wants to time me or I can time myself.
I got you, Nathan. You got 5 minutes starting.
I'm probably not going to use the entire time to talk about this movie because I don't have tons to say about it, but it is a very nice movie. I saw this past weekend the new film Uncle Drew, directed by Charles Stone III, the director behind movies like Drumline, Paid in Full, and Mr. 3000. This is based off of a series of Pepsi Mac commercials, so it's essentially 90 minutes or actually maybe a little longer. It's like an hour and 40 minutes, of branded content. But luckily, it's not very I mean, there's product placement, but it's not like the whole movie's. It's not the Pepsi movie, you know, like the Lego movie or something. It's not that at all. It just uses the concept from a commercial. So it stars as the titular Uncle Drew, the NBA player Kyrie Irving. In addition to him, it stars a number of other famous current and former basketball stars like Shaquille O'Neal, Chris Webber, Reggie Miller, Nate Robinson, and Lisa Leslie. It also, on the non-basketball side of things, stars Lil Rel Howery, the comic relief you may remember from last year's Get Out. Tiffany Haddish, Nick Kroll as the antagonist, and also in small parts JB Smoove and Mike Epps. So basically, this is about a street basketball league, and back in the day, back in the 60s and 70s, there was this incredible basketball star named Uncle Drew, who was a street ball legend in Harlem, and then just disappeared and has not been seen since. And in the present day, actually, the movie starts as like a fictional 30 for 30 documentary about Uncle Drew, which I thought was sort of an interesting device. But fast forwarding to the present day, we catch up with Dax, who is a street ball coach in Harlem, played by Lil Rel Howery. He has poured his life savings into making this basketball team, and has essentially gone broke. His star player is stolen by his arch nemesis, played by a really fun Nick Kroll. I was a big fan of the Kroll Show and always enjoy whenever he shows up, and he's a great villain. So basically, within like 2 days, Lil Rel Howery has to put a team together. He ends up encountering Uncle Drew, who, despite his old age and like very poor old man makeup, it's not really actually trying to convince you that he is legitimately old. I mean, it sort of is very similar to like Bad Grandpa or something like that, but I don't really mind that thing. I mean, it's a comedy. So, you know, Uncle Drew is this like star player still. They drive across the country, picking up his former teammates, who are, one of them is a preacher. You know, one of them lives in a nursing home, getting the team back together. I mean, it's really funny. These guys all have, for the most part, I feel like all the basketball players are good comic performers, especially Chris Webber. He plays a preacher who like dunks a baby in a baptismal font, and like the funniest scene in the movie, and like he's about to dunk this baby in the font, and Lil Rel Howery starts screaming at him like, "Why are you about to dunk a baby? Just like sprinkle a little bit of water on the baby's forehead. Don't throw the baby in the font." So they end up baptizing him instead and like throwing him into the font. So you know, there's some really great stuff here. I mean, Shaq has obviously been in movies before. Whether you like those movies or not is another thing, but you know, he's fun. And I mean, I'm not the biggest basketball fan in the world. I mean, I know who these people are. You know, I have a decent like working knowledge of basketball from Twitter and from rap music and stuff. So there were definitely jokes that I didn't really pick up on. Luckily, one of my friends that I saw it with is a big basketball nut, so he was able to explain it to me. But it's generally like a very sweet movie, you know, about these old guys getting back together and all those good things, and it's a real sort of underdog story. I mean, it's not, you know, like the most visually compelling comedy ever made. You know, you can tell that it was sort of came out of a commercial, but I think it's really fun. I think Lil Rel Howery is great. Tiffany Haddish is great. Nick Kroll, you know, all the basketball players are in it. It's, whether you like sports or not, I think it's one of the funnier movies I've seen this year, and maybe the best basketball movie ever made. I don't know. But maybe it could be. There's not that many great basketball movies. So yeah.
All right, there's your time.
So talking about our only not new movie this week, because I probably won't have time to talk about anything more.
Go ahead and do it.
Gus Van Sant's Last Days. I saw this this week in Metrograph theaters, Gus Van Sant retrospective in advance of his new movie, Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot, which I think is slowly trickling out into theaters. Gus Van Sant actually, as a director who before this year I wasn't really familiar with entirely. I mean, like, I had still not seen Good Will Hunting or Milk or any of the big ones. You know, I was familiar with them, obviously. I had seen My Own Private Idaho a number of years ago. And one of the class that I TA'd for this past semester at school, one of the movies that I had to teach was his movie Elephant, which is the first movie in his Death trilogy, along with Jerry and Last Days. And I was just like, had always sort of been baffled by him as a filmmaker, just because his filmography sort of goes all over the place. I mean, you have very commercial movies like Good Will Hunting and Milk, and really prestige stuff, you know, Finding Forrester, Promised Land, Sea of Trees, or whatever. But then you have the really sort of idiosyncratic, lower budget stuff. You know, obviously his earlier movies like Mala Noche and My Own Private Idaho, you know, the Psycho remake, the Death trilogy, Paranoid Park, these very small, you know, some of the few movies in American cinema that you could, I think, fairly consider like slow cinema. He takes a lot of influence from Bellatar and people like that. And so Last Days is one of, you know, his slower, self-consciously sort of artier air quotes over that movie. It's about, or not really directly about, but inspired by the final days of Kurt Cobain, played by Michael Pitt, although he's called Blake in this, but I mean, obviously it looks like Kurt Cobain. At the beginning of the movie, he's escaped from a rehab center. He's wandering through the woods. He comes back to this mansion that he's been staying in with some friends, and like for a period of 2 days or so, he's just sort of wandering in and out. I mean, everybody in this house is really sort of strung out. So even when he is there, it's like he's not even really there. You know, I mean, obviously, you know, going in, because of Kurt Cobain's life, that this person is going to die at the end of this movie. And the entire 90-minute film feels sort of like this, sort of like a ghost story. Like, this is a person who's still alive, but is in some ways kind of already dead. And so it's a very sad movie. I mean, it's a very, like, filmed in this sort of very patient, contemplative style. It's a very religious movie almost. There's this really beautiful sequence where one of the people that this Blake guy is staying with lets some Mormon missionaries, some actual like real life Mormon missionaries, into the house. And they're talking about the forgiveness and how you can pray for forgiveness. And while this conversation is going on, it's cross-cut with a few rooms over Blake watching the music video for On Bended Knee by Boyz II Men while he's sort of like going into this. I mean, you don't see him take anything, you know, you don't see him do heroin, but it's very clear that like he's going through, you know, he's going through this high and like just passing out. And it's this like very moving sequence. I mean, the whole movie is just like deeply, very sad. It has these beautiful autumnal colors. I mean, really, the cinematography is I believe it was filmed by thinking of another Gus Van Sant movie. But it's, you know, it's like really uses the kind of the natural beauty of the Pacific Northwest very well. You also have a lot of cameos from like Kim Gordon and Ricky Jay and Harmony Korine. Like in Jerry and some of his other more experimentally minded movies, you have a lot of conversations that are really about nothing and that are not related to the goings on really at all. And Michael Pitt is like mumbling throughout the whole movie. So there's a lot of really interesting sound design, kind of using the human voice. The scene where Harmony Korine shows up, you can't even understand him at all. So it's, you know, it's playing a lot with sound. It's you know, using a very slow visual style, and just sort of a devastating performance from Michael Pitt. There's a scene where he sings a song that he himself wrote, and it's just like this single take of him just sort of pounding on his guitar, like wailing, and you don't fully understand what he's saying. I mean, it sounds like Kurt Cobain a little bit, but it is just like heart-wrenching. I think this is definitely my favorite movie of the trilogy. It's a really incredible piece of work, and it's a movie that like finally has finally fully sold me on Gus Van Sant, and I'm no longer confused about his work or style. If you wanna fall in love with him, this is the movie to go to, I think.
Nice. I liked Elephant, so I will probably check this
out. And Jerry is also really good too.
All right. Well, that will wrap up part 1. We're gonna be talking about Dog Star Man in part 2, so you're gonna want to stay around for that one. Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Zach Dennis with an important message because I have not talked to you enough during this episode. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money. We're not clamoring for your dollars. At this time, we just want to enjoy each other's company and talk about the movies and feel our, distribute our thoughts to the world and become podcasting moguls. Simple stuff. No money involved. However, there are a few things that you could do to help out the show. We would really appreciate it. The first thing is review us on iTunes. I know literally every podcast asks you this. They're like, please review us on iTunes, but it's like important because I don't know, iTunes, this is just what they do. This is how the Apple lords constrict us and keep us in their system. That's just what happens. So we need a nice little review. Just take like 2 minutes one day, be like, this is podcast review time. Put us on the list. Secondly, you can tweet us. We're at Cinematary on Twitter, or better yet, send us an email. We're cinematary@yahoo.com so we can hear from you. If you're just like Zach, you have terrible taste. Why do you keep talking about these superhero movies? You keep talking about these Japanese movies where all they do is drink sake and smoke cigarettes and talk about how life's awful. And I'll be like, yeah, but you're wrong. And you'll be like, yeah, but I'm just emailing you. And it'll be a whole thing. It'll be a nice discourse. Think about it. And finally, please tell your friends and family, they should know as well. I'm sure they like movies. I'm sure they like podcasts. We don't know. To recap, review on iTunes Review Day. Do that. Secondly, send your thoughts, Twitter, email. One of those. Do it. Third, share with your friends and family. We would love it. Do it. Please. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the show. Usually I play music associated to the movie, but this is a completely silent movie, so let's all take a moment of silence to think about whatever the hell you want to think about. And we are back with part 2 of episode 203 of Cinematary. In this part, we'll continue our Young Critics Watch Old Movie series with 1961 through 64's Dog Star Man. Directed by Stan Brakhage, he stars himself and his wife Jane. And the series of short experimental films were released over the course of the years 61 to 64 and are comprised of a prelude and 4 parts. Described as a, quote, cosmological epic and, quote, creation myth. Particularly the prelude, Dog Star Man illustrates the odyssey of a bearded woodsman climbing through a snow-covered mountain with his dog to chop down a tree. While doing so, he witnesses various mystical visions with various recurring imagery, such as a woman, child, nature, and the cosmos while making his ascent. The 5 short films all form one larger film, and they are usually always shown together as one. In 1965, Brakhage used the same footage from Dog Star Man and re-edited it into a much longer film, The Art of Vision. Both are generally considered the greatest works of his first mature period. After editing and completing Cat's Cradle, Brakhage began filming Dog Star Man. At the time when he began work on the project, Brakhage had not set on any particular idea on what the project would be about. In addition to this, he had also faced different sets of crises, including the questioning of his distant relationship with his wife Jane at the time, experiencing visions and contemplations of death and decay. The filming of Dog Star Man took on gradually as Brakhage also worked on The Dead. Ever since he commissioned the idea of the project, Brakhage had already had a prelude and 4 parts in mind. Dog Star Man, like his other works, is characterized and known for their abstract imagery and techniques such as scratching and punching holes into the film. The opening of Dog Star Man is entitled Prelude and runs about 26 minutes, making it one of the longer parts of the film. Brakhage described the prelude as a, quote, created dream for the film as opposed to surrealism, in which the work itself is inspired by the dream of the artist. In it, the prelude contains many of the images that recur throughout the rest of the film series, creating a visual leitmotif of the many symbols and concepts of the series of films. There are also many instances to what Brakhage calls, quote, close-eyed vision. Broadly, it exemplifies, among other things, the creation of the universe. The longest of the film cycles, though, running about 30 minutes, is part 1, and it comprises most of the narrative of the film cycle, in which the woodsman struggles with the journey up the mountain along with his dog. Unlike the prelude, where there are many instances of superimposed images that are more abstract to the eye, part 1 is more impressionistic. Major parts of the film are in slow motion, others in time-lapse photography, speeding up motion. One of the most important images in part 1 is the mountain that Brakhage attempts to climb. In contrast to the lengthy running times of the earlier films, part 2 begins a series of shorter segments that run from around 5 to 7 minutes. Its central focus is on the birth of a child, which was filmed on black and white film stock as a part of Brakhage's home videos that he shot during the time. Stylistically, the filming of childbirth in an almost documentary-like way is quite similar to window water baby moving. 2 layers of imagery are imposed over one another, suggesting that the woodsman's life is passing right before his eyes. In 1988, Jonathan Rosenbaum on the film said, when it was first shown back in the mid-1960s, this experimental feature with a prelude and 4 sections was widely regarded as Stan Brakhage's magnum opus. Although it has surely been superseded by many major works since then, following a cycle of seasons as well as a stretch of a single day as a man slowly makes his way up a mountain. The film features multiple superimpositions and includes traces of splice marks, painting, and scratches on the film emulsion as some of its densely woven textures. Mythological, cosmological, and physiological, like much of Brakhage's work during this period, it can be seen as one of the most ambitious lyrical films ever made, and also one of the most pretentious. For those who are inclined to view Brakhage's macho poetics as a trifle self-regarding. Whatever one thinks, and however much the film may seem dated now in relation to Brakhage's subsequent output, it is an achievement to be reckoned with. In 2010, for the Criterion Collection, Fred Camper said, "A conventional narrative film is a machine for the manufacturing of emotions. Some characters and scenes evoke empathy, and others create tension and fear. These emotions are provoked primarily by the subject matter. An image of a marauding axe murderer would scare anyone, and only in the very best of narrative films, also by the style. But while subject matter is important in Brakhage's films, they do their work mainly through composition, camera movement, rhythms within images, and the rhythms of editing or paint on film. They're best seen, in other words, as light moving in time." On that note, let's dive into Dog Star Man, which is, Cinematary's real first true
Good.
Look at the avant-garde. So I watched this last night. I watched it in the most pure sense of seeing this movie in total silence in the dark, with only the sounds of the hum of my refrigerator and my cat licking himself in the background, as I'm sure Brakhage would want. And
wait, what are your tangential thoughts? I want to know.
I'm curious what you guys have to say, because mainly my thoughts are just kind of tangential to the entire thing, and it just kind of becomes a stream of consciousness. So, it's fine. There was images in it that I liked, like the superimpositions of the baby and that kind of sequence, as well as in the second part when he's walking up the mountain, and it's like kind of, you can see the holes being poked in the film, and the kind of strenuous nature of just the act of walking up this mountain with the dog. Like, I felt that. At other parts, I just was kind of like, I don't know what to do with this. And I was thinking, it seems like with avant-garde cinema, you hit this, you're either super into it or you're very dismissive of it. And I was trying so hard to not be dismissive. I was like, I'm going to do all my effort. I'm going to put it all in and try to take as much out of this film as I can. And I felt like I got some. I probably got 20-25%. I don't know if that's a lot, but I worked really hard to get it.
Can I ask, what's your experience with avant-garde cinema? What else have you seen?
Man, I don't know. This just kind of, parts of this felt like something you pop in, you see at an art museum. It's like one of those little things. I probably don't have an extensive history with avant-garde cinema. it's not really my thing. There's elements of it that appeal to me, but there's elements that don't. I think it's wrong to be dismissive of it, because that's just, you shouldn't just dismiss something because you don't understand it, because then you're not learning anything. So I'm not dismissing it, but at the same time, it really didn't do much for me. And I mainly my thoughts around it afterwards were about our relationship with trying to understand a film, and whether or not that, if you're doing it in a genuine fashion, if there's still something that you can get out of it even if you didn't love it. I think that there were effects in it that struck me as something that was moving, but for the most part, yeah, it just kind of, it just felt like a flurry of images, and it was a little it was a little overwhelming at times. I did not like any of the scenes where you could see inside people's bodies. I did not like that. I was I just left the room at one point. So I did not like that.
Oh God. I thought once we got to, I think it's like part 3 is what it's called, when it's like the sexual fantasy sequence. I just used the strategy of trying not to comprehend what I was looking at. I see an image, I tried to force myself not to say, oh, well, that is this part of someone's body. I'm just like, I'm looking at a shape on the screen. But I wasn't wholly successful in forcing my mind to make that censorship. But yeah, I found that sequence pretty painful to watch. But I'll just say about my experience with avant-garde cinema, since it's the first time that Cinematary is covering it. The only experience that I've had with avant-garde cinema has been thanks to the Public Cinema and the Public Cinema's programming at Big Ears. And thanks to them, I've seen quite a lot of it from all the shorts programs they've done over the years, and the more avant-garde features that I saw in the last year at Big Ears. And I talked about this on the podcast in March of this year, but one movie that's really helped me crack avant-garde cinema was Jean-Luc Godard's Goodbye to Language, a movie that, I don't know if I'm interpreting it correctly, but my reading of the movie is that it's asking you to look at the world as if you are an animal. You're just kind of taking in all this primitive, sensory information and getting pleasure from some of it and dismissing other parts of it. And that's kind of my approach to avant-garde cinema as well. It's like, it is kind of like flashes of light on screen, and all cinema's flashes of light on screen. You're just seeing various abstract shapes and unique compositions and very interestingly designed aesthetics through color and texture and stuff like that. And there's stuff of it that just gives me visual pleasure to look at, and there's others that my eyes kind of glazes over. But Stan Brakhage has always been an artist that I've really responded positively to. Partially, I guess, due to the fact that a lot of his works are really short, and you can kind of take them in these bite-sized pieces and rewatch them and kind of dissect them. And because of his approach of painting on celluloid and placing objects on celluloid and running them through the projector, it always has this sort of playful quality to it. Somebody who's just kind of, to put it in a crass way, just playing around with the instruments of cinema. And I think there's a lot of fun to be had there. And then also a lot of really eye-popping, unreal imagery that you get from movies, shorts like Commingled Containers or Black Ice, where you feel like you're being sucked into the frame. It creates this very surreal, abstract experience. Dog Star Man I had a harder time with, maybe because of the length. It is a bit of an endurance test, though an hour is not really long for a movie of any kind, but for a completely silent avant-garde movie, it is challenging at times. And for this thing, there were parts of it that I responded well to. I particularly liked the prelude, and there are parts of it, like I said earlier, were kind of painful to watch. There were other parts that were kind of tedious, but I imagine we can kind of walk through the movie, all the different sections, and just talk about what our reaction to them was. But Nathan, what's your experience with avant-garde and Stan Brakhage in this film?
As far as avant-garde cinema broadly, I don't know. It's always hard to sort of say what my experience with it is, or how much mileage I've had with it, just because it feels, I mean, obviously all segments of cinema are this way, but it feels particularly sort of endless. Like I'm never gonna see it all, and there's obviously a canon of avant-garde cinema, and there are things in filmmakers that you are sort of pushed towards initially. I mean, Stan Brakhage, one of them, Maya Deren, Bruce Conner, Michael Snow, people like that, but it just feels like there's always another direction to go in, because it is so... I mean, there are obviously different modes and styles and practices, but it feels so fertile and open and diverse in terms of what you can do with images. Because, I mean, it's at a certain point, it's sort of anything beyond narrative that is primarily concerned with image and sound, sort of as such, and is trying to find a new way of seeing, and is sort of produced in this independent way, or at least outside of some kind of structure. I mean, that's all avant-garde. It's I don't know. So I always feel like I mean, obviously I have seen a lot compared to, maybe the lay viewer, pick somebody out of a crowd. I've probably seen more than them, but I'm like, no, I've not seen very much at all, and there's always more to see. Stan Brakhage, like you, is somebody I generally respond to. I really echo everything that you said, Andrew, about sort of the sensorial qualities of his work and the playfulness. And then I think it's in Dogstar Man is particularly interesting to me just because it sort of synthesizes two strands of his work, that sort of, the painting, scratching, manipulation of celluloid, and the really like body stuff, with the window water baby moving and active seeing with one's own eyes, which are you sort of remixing the human body, almost like taking, these brief flashes and bursts of all parts of the body, but making them look a little alien, making them look sort of like, objects in outer space. So it has, and then it also has, the stuff, the like actual sort of approaching narrative of the guy, the mountain man, Stan Brakhage's Jeremiah Johnson, which I have to say, I don't know how you guys feel about this. That is honestly the stuff that I respond to least. It just feels very repetitive, and even though the flashing quick superimposed images and the body stuff, that's all sort of hard to process and sometimes uncomfortable and sometimes overwhelming. But at least I'm like more engaged with that than I am with the stuff that is sort of almost more in between, more hybrid with narrative and abstraction.
It's very strange that he chose to, I mean, I guess we can get to it a little bit later, but in that section, part 1, he chose to spend such an extended period of time on like an A to B journey. Like, I know he's breaking up the journey through all these various visual interjections and what's the word I'm looking for? Digressions, I guess. But it is presented as this type of like epic odyssey. We're going to watch a guy go from the bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain, and we're going to see him cut down a tree. Like, A, that doesn't feel like it's working in Stan Brakhage's wheelhouse. But B, it doesn't feel like, you actually watch that journey happen. Like, it keeps cutting back to various images of dude in the snow, but you don't get really any sense of spatial, like, geography. There are many times I was thinking to myself, like, did he cut down the tree? Have we gotten past that part yet? Like, temporally and spatially, it's all very strange. Maybe that is the intention, to kind of throw you off in that way. But it just seems like an odd conceit for Stan Brakhage to tackle.
It feels honestly like, obviously he had a mammoth filmography and I've seen only a fraction of it, but it feels much more, one of the articles that Zach quoted mentioned that, maybe compared to his later work, this feels more dated now. And even though I enjoyed this for the most part and got something out of it, I do feel that, like, both with sort of the Dog Star Man title cards, that just the font looks very sort of 60s psychedelic to me, but also just sort of I don't know, like, I guess maybe Stan Brackage's own look during the climbing up the mountain, just something about that seems very, like, I don't know, like, it could be just in some sort of, like, psychedelic midnight movie almost, like, more than the rest of his stuff and the rest of the stuff in this movie. It feels a lot more like just 1960s, like, ooh.
It's got some hippie hair for sure.
Yeah, maybe it's mostly just his look, but just the, like, Sisyphusian, climbing up the mountain thing just wears on me a little bit more. And at least for me, I feel like that's because of the sort of in-betweenness of it. Like, it maybe serves to give the whole thing some organization and some structure, but I would just rather not have that in a Stan Brakhage work. I don't know. Yeah,
I almost feel like I would rather these be 4 discrete films that don't have this this connective tissue of this narrative that's not really there, right? Like, why do you need to watch all 5 in sequence necessarily?
And that's the interesting thing about all of his longer works, is that they do, for the most part, I think, exist, like Secrets Under Childhood and The Art of Vision, the longer version of this, all exist in multiple parts and are sometimes screened in those individual parts. So there is it's strange having that connective tissue between all of these, but they still are sometimes displayed on their own or would work on their own. I don't know, but as a cycle, it's hard to sort of, I guess it's also a movie where you kind of forget the whole structure of it all and how images are linked together.
I was able to kind of trace it because I don't know how you guys watched this, but I watched it on the Criterion DVD, the By Brakhage anthology set. And for each short, it has an explanation that you can click on, and it has, like, Stan Brakhage explaining what the movie is about and what the inspiration for the movie was. And he talked about getting the idea from seeing a pulp novel called Dog Star Man and not liking the writing and wanting to make something with that title, because that was a really great title, but with, like, a compelling story and with better aesthetics. And then he kind of broke down each section of the movie and talked about exactly what's going on in each of them, like, on a narrative level, almost as if he sees the movie as primarily a narrative rather than this, I don't know, audio, like, visual aesthetic experiment. And so, knowing, like, what each sequence was supposedly about, I was kind of able to compartmentalize each one of them in my brain. But as I was watching them, I wasn't always able to, connect or justify the explanation that he was making with what I was looking at on screen, especially the last section, which I guess is meant to be sort of an amalgamation of all the previous ones. But maybe we should just, like, walk through this movie and talk about the different parts of it, what we feel like is happening, and what our reactions were. Zach?
I just want to add to the kind of figuring out why you have this narrative of him walking up the mountain. I feel like, to an extent, it's like, it is something kind of very trivial of him just walking up this mountain to cut down a tree with a dog, but I feel like it's maybe metaphorically just a strenuous large life event, getting married or having a child, or and he kind of plays with all of those as the kind of superimposed subplots that are happening, because I think that whenever you're going through a major life event of any sort of any nature, it makes you recall and reflect on the moments of your life up to that point, and you kind of have this constant reflection on where you were and where you're going, and you in this present state. And so maybe that's kind of what he's getting at, is that in this act of going up the mountain to cut down a tree, it's also causing him to reflect on his life itself in this kind of very cerebral way.
And I also think it is interesting how he sort of, it's this very simple action, going up a mountain to cut down a tree. That's simple. But I feel like he does sort of, even though I've been maybe critical of it, give it this like cosmic weight, like, this mythic quality where like this is somehow, this simple action, this journey is like the creation of the universe, which is the same thing that he does, I feel like, with the human body, where the body becomes something cosmic, something, like more like a planet or a star than a piece of human flesh. Like it's sort of elevated beyond what it is.
There was a shorts program at Big Ears this past year called Extraterrestrial, and it was all avant-garde shorts, and the connective theme was about the human body and the topography of the world that we live on, so a lot of shorts that kind of juxtapose the contours of the human body with the contours of the earth, and I could definitely see one of these shorts fitting into that program, especially in the last couple sequences when he is doing more superimposition. There are a lot of sequences in which he's kind of cutting back and forth between body hair and like body cavities, as well as like rocks and trees and things like that. And after a certain point, the line starts to blur between what you can kind of pick out, like which is which. The human body starts to take on this quality as if it is like this mountain or this piece of overgrowth that we have to like somehow maintain in the same way that we maintain the natural world that we live in. And
I think in some way, in doing that, everything that you just said really echoes what I've been thinking while we've been talking. I think in some way it's like this movie is, I mean, you could say this probably for any of Brackage's work. I think they all do this in their own way, regardless of the specific practice or methodology that he's using for that work. It is, in some sense, almost like a metaphor for what avant-garde cinema is, because I feel like above all else, avant-garde cinema is about looking at something in a new way, in a new perspective, looking at cinematic form and techniques with a sort of fresh pair of eyes. And because I think we take it for granted sometimes, this sort of hegemonic narrative continuity style, that wasn't a guaranteed development. That wasn't the logical endpoint of cinema. It wasn't predestined to go that way. So I feel like avant-garde cinema allows us to explore those sort of paths not taken. And I think that Dog Star Man, in making us look at the human body, at the natural landscape, at space, at whatever, in these new ways, and as almost like as different things than what they are in our own reality, is, speaks for maybe avant-garde cinema as a whole. The specific work does, just because it's about those new perspectives.
What do you guys make of just this? It seems like when it comes to avant-garde cinema, like I was kind of getting at before, it feels like somebody either fully embraces it and feels like they're elevated because of that, but then you also have the people who fully dismiss it and feel kind of elevated by that. It seems like there's just this alpha and omega rather than there being really any in between for true appreciation for this genre of cinema. I guess my question is there, do people have the ability to find a middle ground with this? Is there a way that people who maybe are on one side of, especially the dismissive side, to kind of find a way to embrace at least some forms of avant-garde cinema?
I think one of the things that I was sort of thinking about coming into this episode, and I think this is maybe where our conversation has just naturally drifted, because I'm sure maybe you guys were thinking about this too, but we have talked about avant-garde works, on their own before in the What We Watched This Week section or in coverage of big years or whatever, but we have not devoted an episode to it like this before. And so I was sort of like, well, how do we talk about this? I mean, even if we are talking about image and rhythm and sound design and all of that with a narrative film, there are still sort of signposts for us to grab onto where we can say, it's about this thing and it has this message. And obviously those things apply to avant-garde cinema too, but it's just like generally, even if the movie is difficult or challenging, a little bit easier to grab onto it with narrative film. So I'm just sort of, I've been like, how do we talk about this? How do we evaluate it? It's hard. It's hard to know because I feel like more, at least for me, I don't know about other people, it's so much more of like a gut response or reaction thing. Like, I mean, there are things where I change my reaction by thinking about it more, but because so much of it is about the senses and having this sort of experiential structural quality, it is about that experience of it and about how I feel then while I'm watching it, while it's the freshest it's ever going to be in my mind. But so I think that, like, ultimately the solution is to just like watch more of it, because when you do watch more of it, I feel like you see, okay, there are certain modes and patterns and things that are, tropes that start to emerge in different practices. And so you can say, because at least for me, again, I like to see things in avant-garde cinema that I haven't seen before, or to see things that genuinely baffle me, where I don't know how an image was constructed or how it was put together, where I'm legitimately like sort of, destabilized a little bit in how I look at something or how I hear something. So you start to see, things that are repetitive, things that are derivative. So that's a hard proposition to make by saying that if you're skeptical about avant-garde cinema, just watch more, since your mileage will vary, obviously. But I think that's honestly the best way to sort of reckon with it. But again, it's hard to talk about. And if I can just make a recommendation, I think if you are on the fence about avant-garde cinema or you want to learn more, I think the hands down maybe one of the best writers on it today is Michael Sosinski, who is, I think, in his work a lot of times grappling with these questions of how do we evaluate this, how do we talk about this, because it's so challenging to write about and talk about.
Yeah, maybe Michael Sosinski would disagree with me, but I get the feeling that avant-garde cinema is so hard to articulate an opinion on or an explanation of, maybe because it's not supposed to, we are in the business of articulating how a certain movie made us feel or what we think a certain movie is trying to do, and avant-garde cinema seems to be working in an almost exclusively like non-verbal mode, where it resists your mind's desire to try and pin it down to one particular thing. It is just kind of like branching off into a lot of vague, abstract directions. And maybe that is why Jean-Luc Godard named his movie Goodbye to Language, because there are certain parts of cinema that it's impossible to kind of put words to, A, because it's a visual medium, and B, because it's experiential, and you can't ever fully put words to what you experienced while you were sitting in the movie theater watching something. And avant-garde seems to me to lean really hard into that idea of like, we're going to make a movie that you can't talk about, you can't necessarily even think about too clearly, but you can experience it. And that's not necessarily something that's offered by other forms. And so my advice to somebody who maybe is thinking about getting into avant-garde cinema or feels intimidated by it would be to like not overthink it too much. Just kind of let it happen. Find things you enjoy or don't enjoy, like I said earlier, and like let that be it. Just experience it, just feel it. Don't feel this sort of pressure to intellectualize it.
Yeah, or to it's not. There's not going to be a puzzle that fits together like that.
Exactly.
If you're just sort of the whole time, if you're just thinking about it, trying to fit everything together, I think you're going to wear yourself out. And I also, since we're probably wrapping up soon, I think another point of guidance, at least in my experience, is to never think about avant-garde cinema as some sort of monolithic thing. After this episode, if you go and watch Dog Star Man and that's not your thing at all, maybe Jody Mack is your thing, or maybe Kevin Everson is your thing, or Maya Deren, or whoever. There's a long history. Kenneth Anger is like an extremely pop friendly sort of fun avant-garde filmmaker. There's fun to be had. There's humor. There's playfulness. There's even narrative sometimes, or something approaching narrative. So there's a lot to be discovered, so if you find something you don't like, it's just treat it like any other kind of movie, just because you don't like one, horror movie. I mean, I guess some people dismiss genres entirely, but, explore, there's a lot out there. So
anything specifically about Dog Star Man before we wrap up? I feel like we've kind of abandoned it. It is a sad lost puppy. Is there anything else?
I'd like to drop my album of Dog Star Man theme songs that I sang, because it was very quiet and I wanted to give some life to the character of Dog Star Man, which I don't know if his name is Dog Star Man, but I just named him that.
It sounds like to me like a Black Sabbath album or something.
What was
Dog Star Man just sounds very metal to me.
Apparently it was a Western pulp novel about sad cowboys originally. But Zach, one of your songs that you made up, I don't remember the lyrics specifically, but it was something about Dog Star Man not knowing what to name his child. Do you remember exactly what you said?
Oh,
there?
yeah. His child was named Puppy Star Boy.
The question was, do I name it Puppy Star Boy or Dog Star Man Jr.? I think that's a good
Junior,
question.
yeah.
Dog Star Man is my father. Call me Puppy Star Boy.
And then I referred to the baby as Puppy Star Boy for the rest of the movie. I was like, Puppy Star Boy's back. I was so concerned also because he was like using the axe to get up the mountain that he was going to like hurt that dog. And I was going to like, I'm going to be pissed if you hurt that dog.
Abraham and Isaac on the top of the mountain kind of situation.
Yeah. The dog was just like, I don't know what avant-garde is. I'm just a dog. Just don't bring me involved. Don't make me involved in this.
Swinging axes, can I just mention there was a shot that looked like it was filmed with a GoPro, but it totally wasn't. Like the shot of the axe swinging and the camera's like at the bottom of the axe and it's pointing out. And that
was really cool.
Yeah, that was an enjoyable shot. Okay, that's all I got. That's my last thought about Dog Star Man.
Dog Star Man, he's climbing up the mountain to get his son, Puppy Star Boy. It was a lot of that. That was the gist of my songs.
Or it sounds like maybe like a Donovan album, like some like mythic Season of the Witch, Dog Star Man. Or like I don't know. Dogstar Man, if you just told me that title, I would think it was like the Blair Witch Project or something. Like, that's what it sounds like.
At times, it felt like the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah, it honestly
like
does
that
a
little
little
shaky camera, and I was like, is that guy going to be standing in the corner or something? What's
the
going
light
on?
in the trees, and
There were many times where I thought he was dying.
I don't know, buddy.
I was more concerned.
Only the Dogstar Man knows.
I was more concerned with the logistics of getting the tree down the mountain, and I kind of wanted to see Dogstar Man 2, where he takes it down the mountain, because, like, just imagine, like, how big's the tree? What's is he gonna slide it down? How is he gonna get back down the mountain?
That was why I was not sure when we were in the story. I kept thinking, like, oh, this is the moment where he's chopping on the tree. There's a lot of swinging going on. And the next scene, he would be walking the same direction, holding nothing. And I was like, oh, well, I guess not. Maybe I had to chop through the overgrowth.
Also, lactating nipples. A lot of those.
Lactating nipples.
A lot of those.
A lot of
beating hearts or lungs, I guess.
Did not like those.
Other
did not like that.
Parts of the human body that I tried not to register so much.
A lot of looking away. I was just like, nope, I'm good.
Yeah.
No Dogstar Man.
Well, Nathan, you've been campaigning to get Dogstar Man on the podcast for like 3 years now. So any final thoughts from you about this momentous accomplishment?
I'm glad we did this. I'm glad that people voted for this movie. Shaking it up a little bit, branching out, and I hope that we talk about more avant-garde cinema in this series in the future. I mean, I don't know, maybe next year we can do a like Kenneth Anger program, or
we should do Wavelength
or something, or that would be cool.
Agreed.
That's all I have to say.
Dogstar Man. All right. Well, I believe that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we will be joined by a special guest. We're going to be talking about 1962's Cleo from 5 to 7, and Tracy Cox Stanton from SCAD is going to be joining me. We're going to be talking about that film, and yeah, we're going to get some Agnes Varda in our lives, because I don't think you can ever get enough Agnes Varda in your life. That's my selling point. But also, I'd recommend going to cinematary.com. Nathan had a big special Schmeiten Schmaun list on the podcast. It's the Film Twitter top 10 or top 25 movies of all time. I thought it came out really cool. It lots of interesting picks. People arguing away, calling people who like 2001 awful human beings or whatever. So it was a fun time.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is in the top 10. So consider that your
death always helps movies out. Like, every time some famous director dies, their work shoots up the next year. Happened with Jacques Rivette, Chantal Akerman, Kiarostami, Toby Hooper.
Yeah. So
death is good for business.
Interested to see this continue in the future. The 2019 Schmeiten Schmaun list.
Yeah.
Check us out next summer.
It got too big to fail.
Thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week. All right. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. I wanted to take one final moment to remind you to check out Audible and get a free 30-day free trial just for being a listener of Cinematary. You can start your trial by going to www.audibletrial.com/Cinematary and picking through over 180,000 titles that can be accessed from your iPhone, your Android, your Kindle, or even your MP3 player. Again, that link is www.audibletrial.com/Cinematary. See you next week.